Will you put your hand on your stomach for me, please? We're going to take 3 deep breaths. Breathe in. Breathe out. Just slowly. Again, breathe in. Hold it. And breathe out. Breathe in. Hold it. And breathe out. Today we're going to learn about how to rest on the run. How to recover while we are running. While I was running on the treadmill a few years ago, I discovered that when I changed my speed down a bit, I could actually catch my breath while I was still running. And it has been a busy start after the last 2 years. 2022 has gone off with a bang. Can you believe we're in term 2? I don't know what that excuse for a holiday was last week, but it was far too short. And things seem to be really at fast speeds at the moment. And I want to talk about how do we rest while on the run. I'm not, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not suggesting that there are not times to stop and rest. There are times to stop and rest when we've experienced particular grief or trauma, or it's just a season of rest. But sometimes we should rest on the run, and other times we have to learn to rest on the run because of the particular season that we're in, and there is no space for rest, but we need to be able to keep going, and so we have to learn to rest on the run. So we're going to be looking at the life of David, and David was an expert at this. He was an expert at strengthening himself in the Lord, even in times of difficulty, even when he had to keep going, when he was absolutely exhausted. And so the main text for today is 1 Samuel 30, and in this text we see that David has been at a battle with his guys, and he has now been traveling back from the battle for 3 days, and he arrives back. He is in exile. He's not king at this point. King Saul is still king. King Saul has tried to take David's life, and so David is living outside of Israel, and he's been at a battle, come back to his city that he's established with his men and his mighty men, and the city has been raided in their absence. So they arrive back, and it just feels like the goalposts have just moved another many, many miles into the future when they were coming home to rest. And so we pick it up in 1 Samuel 30, where it says this: Now when David and his men came to Ziklag, that's their home city, on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burnt it with fire and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went on their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for his people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. He's exhausted. He's just come back from battle, then a 3-day journey. He's arrived. Now he's on top of his exhaustion, on top of whatever he's experienced in battle. He has his own grief. He has wept for his own wives and his own family. And now on top of that, he also is experiencing the criticism of the men that are in his team and who are speaking of stoning him. So in every way, he is exhausted, and he may not stop now. He may not end now because the people he loves are in captivity. And so David learns what it means to strengthen himself in the Lord. And this is not just pasting a smile on his face and having happy talk and saying, come on, guys, it's going to be okay. This is the kind of strengthening in the Lord that enables him to find energy for himself, enables him to have a strategy for the future, and enables him to be persuasive enough to change people from wanting to stone him to wanting to follow him into the next season of the battle. So this is a remarkable degree of strengthening himself on the run in the Lord. So we're going to look at what were a few of his secrets. What did David do? What were some of the habits that he had in his lives, some of the disciplines that he had in his life that enabled him to strengthen himself in the Lord even in these extreme circumstances, enabled him to be able to rest while on the run to have energy for the next. So I looked through a bunch of Psalms because David has written a whole lot of Psalms and they're often accredited to David. And in so many of them, I could have picked them because so many of them express the same disciplines, the same habits, the same character that we know to be true of David. And so I picked one of them and I picked Psalm 27. And here are a couple of the verses that come from Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, and that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to acquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong, and let your heart take courage, and wait for the Lord. So hopefully you have picked up some of the keys that I saw in there, but I'm going to spell them out to you. The wisdom is going to be the wisdom of the Lord as given to David, but the words that I'm going to be using are the words of Kyle, my personal trainer. So I don't know if you've seen across the courtyard in one of the middle classrooms, we have doubled that up in order to be wise with our space and allowed a personal trainer to rent out a room there. So his name is Carl Ralph, and he's available if you want to go and get trained by him. So Rich goes and gets trained twice a week. I do as well. And so the words are words that he has used because a trainer who trains our physical bodies can so easily use the same words that it means to train our spirits because we are one. We are made to be mind, body, soul, and spirit, intermingled, strong in all of it. And so the first thing that Carl will do is, as we begin, he'll give us exercises to do. He says, all right, this is what you're going to do. And as we start, he notices straight away that we're not breathing. Straight away, he looks at us and he says, you guys are not breathing yet. Start breathing. Remember to breathe. And so what we've realized is that as we start an exercise, we brace ourselves almost for the one rep, for the one hit. So it's like short-term survival to hold your breath because something difficult is coming up. But holding your breath is never going to allow you to have long-term endurance. It's only ever going to allow you to have short-term survival. And so the first thing we learn is keep breathing. Keep breathing. Keep breathing, and David knows this lesson that it says, because I want to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. To dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of our lives. We need to train ourselves for long-term endurance, not just for short-term survival. So breathing, if we use that as a metaphor for taking in the Spirit of God, living in His presence, dwelling with Him, we learn some interesting parallels. Because when it comes to breathing, the more exercise you're doing, the more oxygen you need. And the more oxygen you have, the better equipped you are to deal with the activities and the exercise that you're taking on. Even to the point of the more oxygen you have, the more weight you're able to lift. The better you are breathing, the longer your muscles are able to endure for, and the better you're breathing, the quicker you will recover after your high-intensity exercise. The more we are in the presence of God, the more we are taking in the life source of God, the more weight we are able to carry, the more we are able to endure in times of difficulty, and the quicker we will recover after we have been doing these endurance exercises that have been intense for long periods of time. Interestingly, with breathing, we are supposed to be breathing from our diaphragms, deep from within the center of us. But often we breathe up here. A lot of people incorrectly breathe in a way that is all about effort. It's all, and the more that you breathe up here in your effort, in the tension of your shoulders and your neck and your chest, actually that decreases oxygen. It increases your heart rate. It increases your blood pressure. And it causes an increase in anxiety and stress. So a lack of breathing properly from the center of your breathing causes the anxiety and stress that makes you continue to breathe shallowly. So the exercise experts will tell us we need to, if we are not breathing correctly in our daily activities, we need to practice that in times of non-activity. We actually need to lie down on the floor, put our hands on our bellies, and practice 10 deep breaths, breathing from deep in your center. If you are unable to carry the presence of God through your times of difficulty, through your times of strain, through the race that is your life, you need to go back and find those moments of meditation, those moments of quiet when you deeply center yourself in the presence of God, when you deeply are able to be aware and dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life, so that you carry that habit, that breathing ability into your exercise, into your activity, into the race that is your life. So I ask you this question, friends: how is your breathing? How is your breathing? And what do you need to do to get it right? As Carl will say in the start, remember to breathe, and then through the exercise, keep breathing, keep breathing, keep breathing. How is your breathing? Next, as we're going, and Carl's given us a little bit of a tricky exercise, sometimes he'll make us jump over something, and he says, make sure. Make sure. Sometimes it's a big box, and we have to jump onto the box and off the box on the other side. Onto the box and off the box the other side. And Carl will say, make sure. If you look at Richard's leg later on, you'll see he's got a massive roasty from here to here, because in doing box jumps, he didn't make sure, and he injured himself. You need to make sure to place your feet correctly, to place your stability carefully when you are doing difficult things. Make sure. So David knew how to make sure where he was placing his life. And he says this in the Psalm, the Lord is the stronghold of my life. He placed his identity, his stability, his destiny carefully where it was stable, where it would not be shaken. Make sure where you are placed. Years after David ended up becoming king, after King Saul had been killed, David became king. And David, in his kingship, one of his sons decided that it was time for him to be king. Absalom was his name, and he decided to usurp David's throne, and he caused an insurrection. And as he was coming up to the capital city with the guys that were in his team, that were part of this mutiny, so to speak, David gathered his wives, his household, his children, and he left the capital city to protect them and to prevent this war between him and his son. And as he's going along, surrounded not only by his family, but on the left and the right of him, he has the mighty men that have fought with him in the olden days, in the before he was king, in the wilderness, guys that are incredibly hardcore. These are the mighty men who fought a lion in a snowy pit one day. These are the mighty men who have slayed multiple giants. These are the mighty men who single-handedly, one of them slew an entire army until his hand was frozen on his sword. These are incredibly mighty men. And as they are going along, there is a person called Shimei who is from the household of the old King Saul, and he starts cursing David as he goes. And he says, you deserve this. The blood of the household of Saul is on your head. This is the right thing to happen to you. And he starts throwing stones and curses upon David and his family and these mighty men. This guy's very brave or very stupid. And these mighty men are not used to this. And they turn to David and they say, who is this dead dog that thinks that he can curse the king? Let me go and chop off his head. And David turns to this guy and he says to him, what have I got to do with you? Our ways are so different. Your ways are not like my ways. Your ways are not like the ways of God. What if God has told this guy to curse me? You don't know. Just leave him alone. In fact, he turns towards the rest of his family and he says to them, family, friends, my own son is trying to take my life. Who is this man? Let him curse me. My own son is against me. Let him do what he wants. Maybe God has asked him to curse me. Or maybe God will hear his curses and one day will turn it into blessing for me if he sees fit. And so they continue on their way while this guy Shimei is throwing rocks and hurling dust at them. And we read that as David and his people arrived at their destination, they were very weary. And David refreshed himself again. That same line comes out. David refreshed himself again under massive criticism, under difficult circumstances, a difficult journey. David has this uncanny ability to find refreshment even there. How does he do it? David knows that his life is in the stronghold of God. His life is completely hidden in God. David is secure in his identity. You notice there's this dratted Saul guy, he's dead, and he still manages to curse David. He still manages to be a thorn in his side. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that those people who are against you and against the work that you are doing, who have evil intent for you, have a pervasive ability to affect you even when they're not there. And you know, it is a strange thing to do. And I'm not talking about just people who don't like you. We all have people who don't like us, and perhaps we don't like them either, so that's okay. But as you are following the ways of God, you will notice that you start to collect enemies. And people might look at you and say, well, you must be doing something wrong. No, it is just a fact that if you follow more and more after the things of God, you will collect more and more enemies. That is a natural thing to happen. And you'll notice that those are different from just natural people who don't like you, because these enemies have got a pervasive ability of affecting your life even when they're not there. Even when it is such a roundabout way that attack is coming at you, but when you link it, it goes back to those very people where there was a stronghold for your destruction. And for David, that's Saul. So even if we look at that original story, 1 Samuel 30, that we're basing this out of, when David was in exile and the Amalekites came and kidnapped his family, those Amalekites, just a few chapters before, were supposed to have been destroyed by King Saul. King Saul's job was to destroy the Amalekites completely, and he disobeyed the prophets, and he decided to leave some of them alive. And that was the reason why the kingship had been taken from Saul and was now in David's hands. So even then, King Saul's not in the picture, but the Amalekites are there causing trouble because he didn't do his job. Now King Saul's dead, and one of his households is cursing David when he is at the lowest of the low. So in this moment, what does David do? He is being criticized. He's being told that he deserves what he's getting because the blood of the house of Saul is upon him. Ironically, this is the area where he has been most careful to follow the ways of God, because he knows he's at risk. Saul has been a thorn in his side, and he has been so careful to be obedient to God in this area. Twice, while he was being chased down by Saul for his life, he had opportunity to kill Saul, and he didn't do it. He said, this is not my job to take the life of Saul. So twice he's protected Saul's life. Then, when Saul did die, the messenger who came to tell David that Saul was dead and thought that he was bringing good news, David put the messenger to death to say, this is the opposite of good news to me, that Saul is dead. Then he goes and gives Saul and Jonathan a burial and rewards those who have protected their bodies, and afterwards searches out those of Saul's household that he can bless when he is king. He has gone over and above to bless Saul. And yet he's being criticized, and rocks are being thrown at him for having the blood of Saul's household on his head. And in this moment, he doesn't turn to Shimei and say, "Are you joking? Do you know what I've done for Saul?" Instead, he knows that this is an area where he has tried very hard, and he has no idea whether he's done enough. He's no idea whether he knows that it's a risky area for him. And so he says, maybe God is asking this guy to curse me. And if not, if I have been faithful in this area, if I have done well, God will turn his curses into blessings. His entire destiny, identity is firmly in God. You know, it's just, I said David is secure in his identity, not David is secure in his righteousness. He's not trusting in his own righteousness. He's trusting in God, that as he keeps placing his life in God's hands, God will do well to protect God's name. And he is okay with that outcome. Make sure, friends, when we are in difficult times, how can we make sure? How can we place our feet firmly in God, hidden in God? I want to ask you this question around this point. Who are you most afraid of disappointing? Because if you are afraid of disappointing them, then you have appointed them to be the ones who decide whether or not you are approved. Who are you most afraid of disappointing? Because perhaps you need to unappoint them of being the ones that can determine whether or not you are approved. We appoint God, and we work at not disappointing God, because our approval lies with God. He is the stronghold of our lives. Who are you afraid of disappointing? Who today do you need to unappoint so that you can be sure to place your feet in the right place where they will not fall and you will not be injured when you're tired on the run? Third thing that Carl teaches us, sometimes Carl will give us a whackload to do, and it's a lot. And he'll say to us, notice, I didn't say that you have to do it unbroken. And so that means you're allowed to take a break, a few breaths in between your reps, right? And so you're doing all these sit-ups, and I'll just be at the last one, I'm just at the end of myself, but I'm nowhere near finished. And I'll be about to try another one, and Carl will say, not yet. Not yet. Sometimes I just count to 2 and then go for it, and I completely waste a rep. I half sit up, it doesn't count, I'm not allowed to count it. I fall back down, I've wasted energy, I've got to go back to the beginning in terms of waiting to have enough energy to do it again, all because I've gone too soon. And Carl will say, not yet, not yet, not yet, okay now. And if I wait until he says, okay now, I can do 10 more. When before I could only do half of one more. And it's only a few more seconds that he asks me to wait. And so here we learn in Psalm 27 that it says, let your heart take courage, wait for the Lord. Let your heart take courage. We need to let our hearts have time. Let your heart take courage, wait for the Lord. David learns this in that moment when he arrives back to his city, Ziklag, and it's been raided, it's on fire, there's nothing left, and he's exhausted, he's grieving, he cries for his wives, he cries for his friends' wives and children, he is grieved, he strengthens himself in the Lord, and then David inquires of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? And God answers, pursue them, you will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. We need to hear God for our next step. Wait, let your heart take courage, and hear God for our next step. David, when he is ready, when he's waited on the Lord, goes out and pursues the raiding party and recovers everything that the Amalekites have taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing. Young and old, boy or girl, plunder and anything else that was taken. He took all the flocks, the herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, this is David's plunder. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Okay, now. What is God asking you to wait for? Can you hear his voice? Do you know his not yet? And are you waiting for the okay now? Because after the okay now, you can go 10 kilometers, but if you go a few seconds too early, you can't even do one. Not yet. Thirdly, now we're getting really tired, okay? And so we're struggling, and the back starts going and bending all right, and the weaknesses start showing. And at this point, Carl will say, hold your form. Hold your form. When we get tired, our weaknesses start to give in on us, and we start to lean on the things that are the very worst things that we should not be leaning on. So sometimes in life, we have luxuries and indulgences that are absolutely fine when we're strong, absolutely fine when we have energy to have them as extras. But then, when we become tired, we start to lean on the very things that we're not supposed to be building our lives on. And those luxuries and indulgences that are supposed to be kept as desserts start to become the meals of sustenance that we lean on the most. We start to be using the weakest parts that we shouldn't be leaning on. I want to warn you that every church leader, mature Christian, that I have had a deep conversation with in the last 3 weeks has said to me, we're tired, we're cutting out everything in our life that is the excesses. We're going to sleep early, we're waking up early, we're putting quiet times carefully into our times of devotion, we're starting to put disciplines into place that we could have got away with when we weren't tired. Friends, we need to be careful. When we get tired, we lean on our weaknesses. What are those things when you're feeling a little bit tired that you normally go to that are maybe okay when you've also got some strength left? Maybe the unhealthy snacks, the alcohol, the late nights, the entertainment of social media or the Netflix or whatever it is that you lean on that are fine as extras, not okay as meals of sustenance, particularly when you are getting tired. The tireder you get, the more you need to hold your form. David says, teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Because of the things that could take me out, lead me on a level path. Teach me your ways. Put your disciplines back into my life, God, because of my enemies. In 1 Peter 5, verse 8, we read, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. I'm begging you, church, after 2 years of hard slog, when we are starting to lean on our backs where we shouldn't be leaning, where we're starting to lean on things that we should not be building our lives on, please hold your form as you get tired. Hold your disciplines. Put those things into place that are strong enough to hold you when you are tired. What might you be leaning on that will give way and cause you to fall into a pit? What might you be leaning on that could give way and cause you to go down a slippery slope? Fifthly, and this one is for free because Kyle doesn't actually say to us, partner up, but he embodies the fact that we do everything that is difficult in community, in team. As we're going, as things are getting tough, he can spot the bar for us. He can hold it when we are going to drop it on our heads. And he is able to support us in times of difficulty. Now, when David's raiding party went out, they've been exhausted, they've come back, now they've had the grief of losing their city. They're now going along, David's encouraged them, and they're on their way to get their wives and children back from the Amalekites. On the way, there are some guys, 200 guys, who just can't go any further. They just don't have anything left in them. And sometimes we just don't have anything left in them. But these men were not fools. They were wise enough to be in a community where some guys were able to go further. And those guys went further, and they were able to get the plunder that we spoke about, get back every wife, every son and daughter, every goat, every sheep. And on their way back, David arrives back to these 200 men that have waited by the bags, waited by the brook where they've left some of their belongings. And he comes and he greets them, and there's a bit of a celebration. And then some people that were with David along in the recovery party, the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we recovered. But David said, you shall not do so, brothers, with what the Lord has given us. Has he preserved us and given into our hands the band that came against us for this? Who would listen to you in this matter? We hear the same echo of, what have I to do with this? What have I to do with you? Who would listen to you in this matter? And he passes a new way, and he says, for as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. As his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike, and he made it a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward till this. You may be in a situation where you're just needing to be spotted, where you're just needing to be looked after. And I pray that you have put yourself into a band, into a community that is able to spot you at a time when you need it most. If that time is still in your future, please put yourself into community, put yourself into partners, put yourself into life groups and relationships, people who are able to go the distance to get your plunder when you just can't go any further. So my first question around this point is, are there people in your band that can get what you need when you just can't go any further? And secondly, who might there be in your band that needs you to do this for them? Who might there be who just cannot recover their own plunder, who cannot recover their own lives that have been raided, and they just can't go any further? Is there someone that you can spot right now, that you can go the distance for amongst us who can't do it for themselves? Friends, it is possible to rest on the run. It is possible, like David, even when you're exhausted, when you have experienced incredible grief, when you have been criticized and accused of things that perhaps you did not deserve, even then it is possible to rest on the run. But we need to keep breathing. We need to position ourselves in the house of the Lord. We need to make sure that the Lord is our stronghold, and appoint those who maybe we have put our lives in, and appoint God as the stronghold of our lives. We need to listen to the not yet, not yet. We need to wait on the Lord and allow our hearts to take courage. Hold your form, I urge you. Hold your form, hold your discipline when you're getting tired. Teach me your way, O Lord, and let me walk on level paths because of my enemies. And then partner up, put yourself in community, go the extra mile for those who can't, and make sure that there are people that you are investing into that can go the extra mile when you are not able to, so that it can be true of us, that it shall be said, for as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. Let's just take one more deep breath as we close. I'd ask that the presence of God would be with us. God, that you would go with us. That we would rest in our race. That you would enable us to carry heavier weights. To have better endurance. And to recover quicker. Because we are presenced with you. We are in your presence. And your wisdom, your ways will carry us further than we ever thought possible, even when we think we can't go one more step. Amen.